Joyce. So, that's Dan and Ryan. Sorry, projecting. There's a bit of an echo. It captures the live stream. So yeah, let me do this. So we'll try to not do that. So we actually wanted to start by asking. Of course, my remote keeps stopping. Who's in the room and why you chose to come to this session? And since we've got a small group, I think we can actually just fully dive into that. That's my dog. So yeah, who do we have in the room? What's the interest? Okay. Right. Interesting. So an instructional designer for medicine who is very similar. Cool.
We're happy you're here.
All of us.
Absolutely. Curious to see where some of the links might be.
Right. So CI. Make people leaders. And one more. We're asking. And wire. Okay. Interest because students. I like it. Great. Thanks.
Reason to be interested.
Yeah. So,
and should we introduce ourselves as well?
Yeah, I guess so.
A little bit.
Okay.
So Ryan and I are both with the Student Experience Office, which is part of Student Life, and we both work in student leadership development. So, in addition to some of the things that we'll talk about now in a moment in terms of embedding leadership in curricula, we also plan the annual leadership conference, which is actually now multiple times a year. We do workshops. We're rolling out an experience fellowship program in the coming months, which is a program aimed at student volunteers to further develop their leadership abilities and then specify in an area that they're interested in within the institution. Am I missing anything?
No, I think what you'll hear about today is part of a big reframing. Some of those projects that Jen just mentioned are... and that's our shared interest, I guess. Yeah.
Cool.
So.
Okay, so we wanted to we've heard it from everybody a little bit in terms of what your interest is. So we wanted to get a little bit of a sense, first of all. So what leadership work have you done already? So that could be within this institution. It could be within other careers that you've had. It could be through your volunteer work. So what leadership work have you done? And maybe we can just go popcorn style if anyone wants to
Yeah, we won't ask for a report from absolutely
No.
everybody, but
Great.
Well,
Fabulous.
so leadership as making more leaders through education, through offering education. Does anybody else kind of echo that? Do you think that you also do that kind of work? Okay. Other examples of leadership?
Yeah. Absolutely. And does anyone else have experience on board of directors or those kind of committee roles? Yeah. Okay, so lots of them. That's great. So it seems like everyone has leadership experience in one way or another, whether it's a formal or informal role that you've had. So now I want to ask, what leadership training have you received? So when you were doing, and specifically in terms of when you were completing your undergraduate or maybe your master's degree or PhD, what forms of leadership, formal leadership training did you receive?
I had a shrug. So a shrug in the third row.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. So your academic degree had embedded leadership, and then you sought out additional leadership training. Fabulous. Any other experiences similar to yours?
Right. So from being involved, the organizations who've involved you have wanted to skill you up a little bit. Sure. Interesting.
Absolutely. So what we've heard a little bit is that the amount of leadership training or formal leadership education that you've received is a little bit contingent on the opportunities you've had. So whether you've been part of a board and received that additional training, as a student perhaps engaging in some additional kind of co-curricular out-of-class leadership training, some opportunities through the Gardner Center, which you pursued yourself, which is fabulous, and of course through your degree as well. So this is exactly what we've heard from students, which is the idea that there are sometimes leadership opportunities to engage with, but they're kind of hard to access. So, you know, if myself as a student doing an arts degree, for example, maybe I likely wouldn't engage with leadership learning and leadership development through my academic program. It would then be up to me to seek that out of class, and that's contingent on me having the ability, the time, the financial status to do so, and all those different pieces. So there's this kind of dichotomy between the need for leadership and the actual leadership training that we're offering students specifically within the classroom. So we know it's essential, but it's not always happening within a classroom setting. So yeah, exactly. Leadership skills are not traditionally taught to or formally learned by students.
And yet we know that these are necessary for accreditation in some of our professional schools, and they're even more necessary as a simple professional ability of anybody that gets out there in the workforce. I heard a stat. I was at a UNESCO forum, a global UNESCO forum, and somebody said a stat, and I think it was one of those sort of made-up stats that have some truth to them. 3% of people out leadership leadership experience, the stuff that in post-secondary, right? Of leadership roles in the come to our kinds of institutions. Have recognized are necessary accidentally and not in the classroom. So that's the dream. We know that these skills are crucial. We know that this becomes true, more and more true, the more successful someone is. The higher up you go, or as David Allen says, the better you get, the better you better get, right? And yet, we don't necessarily embed these kinds of formal education in a post-secondary education. You're all sold on that argument because you're here, but it's nice to revisit it and to really, really get a sense of the onus. Glad to see so many faculty members interested and so many faculties interested in making this more prominent. So we want to tell you a bit about what we did. I'm going to pass you the remote to Stephen Walker.
Great, thanks. Perfect. So what did we do? So first of all, so of course recognizing that there's a need to embed leadership in curricula, and from a kind of like fundamental level of, we know that students are in the classroom, so let's meet students in the classroom and offer them these opportunities to engage in leadership development that's not only related to themselves as a student, as a person, as who's navigating life, but also as a person who has a specific academic interest, whether that is nursing or education or medicine, or in our case, pharmacy. So we of pharmacy who were going through an accreditation review process whereby the accreditations that they required had a leadership focus. So they reached out to us and we partnered with them to think a little bit about what are students' needs when it comes to pharmacy and leadership. So what are the fundamental skills and knowledge and theories that they need to be introduced to from our standpoint? So what's kind of some of that introductory stuff? But then on the flip side of that, what is useful for the pharmacy profession as students who are going to be entering the workforce as pharmacists in the next couple of years? So we had a conversation with pharmacy about some of those pieces. And then the next thing that we did is we just kind of built an outline. So this was through a couple of meetings. We said, you know what, there's an opportunity here. We have the knowledge and the skill set in terms of leadership development. You have the kind of institutional knowledge and the understanding of what students require within the pharmacy workforce. Let's kind of team up and think a little bit about how we can integrate both into the same course. So the course that we came up with was Leadership and Health Promotion, which is a 3,000 level pharmacy course. So we talked a little bit more about this. We built an outline and decided to take a modular approach to developing this course. So we have 12 weeks of that we developed. We essentially divided and conquered. So we took 6, they took 6, and within each week of content, there's 6 modules. And the reason that we did that is because we wanted this to not only be something that could be relevant to these students, but we wanted it to be something that could be relevant to any student, and something that we bring modules from this week of content and modules from this week of content, and maybe we form it into you know, a 2-class series for education, or for arts, or for science, right? So we divided up the content. And then we wanted to see, as we were kind of developing this through the winter, and we were developing our 6 weeks worth of content, is this going to work in a classroom setting? So we had some of the content that we developed was surrounding leadership versus management, for example. How to develop effective teams, what to do when teams fail. What is your role as a leader within a team, but then how does my leadership style differ from Ryan's leadership style? We had self-assessment aspects of this course, so we leaned into StrengthsFinder, which is a strengths-based leadership and learning approach to self-assessment, but we also leaned into other self-assessment tools like 16 Personalities, which is more similar to Myers-Briggs, and also an emotional intelligence type a self-assessment quiz. So we had lots of little aspects of this, and we wanted to see if it worked. So we did a 50-minute class with a group of 4,000 level pharmacy students, and we did some content development, we showed a video, we went through a case study working with a professor with the School of Pharmacy, and we got really great feedback, and people are really, some of the feedback that we got that we were surprised about was students coming to us afterwards and saying, this is the first time I've been exposed to leadership education. This is the first time someone suggested to me that this was something that I needed to consider and that I needed to be thinking about for my future career. And I think that that was a really important moment for a lot of those students who, you know, maybe didn't engage in as a president of a club or society, or weren't coming out to become team leads with student life, but that they knew that at a certain point in their career they'd be expected to know some of this, some of these theories and some of this knowledge surrounding leadership.
Keep in mind too, just a quick point, that these are senior pharmacy students, so they've actually been through almost 2 degrees, and this is the first time somebody sat down at the end of the class and said, the only reason I have any exposure to this stuff is because I had a career before I came back to go to pharmacy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, pretty necessary.
Absolutely. And then so finally we tested it and we made some alterations depending on that. And at this point, we actually have 6 weeks worth of content that we're ready to roll out with pharmacy. So this course is going to be happening next winter. It's going to be a blended course, so student life will be teaching half of it, pharmacy will be teaching the other half of it, and we're hoping to be in on each of our sessions. So when we did this test course, the Associate Dean of Pharmacy kind of was there for the class as well. And there were points when she jumped in and she, you know, spoke to, you know, her experiences as a young pharmacist, her experience dealing with physicians in a pharmacy setting, her experience struggling to take on a leadership role or, you know, tell a senior pharmacist what she felt her opinion was in these kinds of settings. And this was really powerful because, you know, maybe she wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak to some of those experiences without the framing of leadership and the framing of teams, which we were able to offer. So then the last piece is we tried to figure out, so how are we going to assess this group of students? We want them to prove that they have an understanding of their own leadership styles, an understanding of other people's leadership styles, and an understanding of how they can work together in a team without butting into kill each other. So what we did is we developed a integrated leadership learning activity, leadership and health promotion activity. So basically we married leadership and health promotion by developing a project where students had to take on a health promotion activity. So for example, students will be divided into teams of 3 to 4, and they'll be expected to take on a health promotion activity. So that could be going to a school and educating students on the benefits of getting a flu shot. It could be talking about, trying to think of other examples that we came up with. It could be going and doing blood pressure checks with university students.
Or authoring a letter to the editor of the Telegram in order to communicate about some needs to be addressed.
Right, absolutely. So it can basically be whatever the student wants, but the thing that's interesting from our standpoint is there's 2 points where students need to present on what they've done. At the first point, they need to talk about their team. So they need to, in their team, understand what each of their leadership styles are after doing several self-assessments, but they also really need to understand what each of the other leadership styles are in the group. So perhaps I'm a more extroverted leader, I'm happy to be up here and talking, maybe you're more introverted. And while you're not going to be the one getting up in front of 300 high school students and talking about the flu shot, you're going to make some deadly infographics. And we're going to share them with the students, or we're going to share them online through LinkedIn and Facebook and these types of things. So it's an acknowledgement that those 2 leadership styles are equally as important and can be integrated into a team in a really meaningful way. So that's the first part of that self-assessment, and then at the end, we're looking for opportunities to actually share some of those initiatives. So what did students do? Is there a way that we can kind of broadcast that through videos or through LinkedIn or through Facebook or through letters to the editor so that there's a kind of understanding about some of the activities that students have the potential and the capacity to take on that really positively influence the community. So it's kind of a win-win situation. And we're also, of course, bringing this online, so it will be integrated through a Brightspace shell so that students have the capacity to kind of take on that integrated learning approach, but we also really are interested in knowledge dissemination. So not only understanding your own competencies as a leader and how that translates to some of the work you do, but being able to communicate that to populations. Whether that is online, whether it's getting up in front of a nursing home and talking about some of the work that you've done, or if it's kind of more written or traditional forms of media and coverage. So there's the kind of multifaceted approach and benefit, I think, to students and to the community as a whole.
One other thing on the project is that it really we do group work in lots of different faculties. opportunity to do it in this course is that it's deeply reflective of the kinds of content that they have to engage with in terms of theory, right? And so they have to think about themselves, and then they have to think about themselves in the context of the group. They have to think about their group, and then they have to think about the work they're doing. And they have to relate all of that to leadership theories, because we're telling them about leadership theories, the common, like 5 or 6, and leadership styles and how they approach it. And all of that's embedded on this constant reflection. So it's, because I've done plenty of group work as a student myself, there's lots of opportunity for that, but rarely are we told to actually think really deeply about the work that we're doing, which is that first half of people. The second piece that this project also accomplishes is thinking about try and change the world. It also gets them in that, because another part of the course, another type of content that we cover is how change happens and how to manage change and how to move forward. Are you using a particular strategy to solve that problem? So the project really does help them engage with all of those aspects all at the same time.
So just to kind of quickly give you a sense, this is some of the content that we've covered through this course. So this is just 1 week of content that you see here. So we talk about like the pharmacy side of things, so the structure of pharmacy leadership and governance in Newfoundland and Labrador. So thinking about what your potential role could be in the future in terms of taking on a formal leadership position. But then we also talk about those informal roles that students take every day and future professionals take every day. So whether that is steering a group meeting in the right direction, right, when nobody else is, whether it's understanding that a patient got prescribed the wrong amount of medication and having to call up a physician and have that difficult conversation. So those to us are all leadership opportunities and really integral ways that students need to engage with their own leadership skills and styles. So we talk about leadership in teams, so what a successful team looks like, how to develop a successful team, and to sustain a successful team. We talk about dysfunctions of a team, so what to do when things go wrong in a team and how to steer things back in the right direction. We also take a case study approach to a lot of this work, and this is important because while we are teaching and engaging students in leadership development, we want to be constantly tying it back to pharmacy or education or nursing or medicine or whatever it is that's relevant to them and the reason they're taking that class. So case studies offer a really great opportunity to do that. So we talk about situations that happen every day within a hospital or within a pharmacy, and then challenge students to think about how they would deal with that while leaning into their own knowledge of leadership and theories of leadership and the styles of leadership that are presented within that case scenario. And then we talk about, as Ryan mentioned, the change dimension of things. So, you know, we kind of try to offer the fact that change is constant, especially in the 21st century, and understanding how to anticipate change and how to move with change and how to take a lead role when there's a lot of uncertainty and when there's a requirement for somebody to step up to the plate. 1 week of content, yeah. So this is, as I mentioned, a modular approach, so each one of these would represent a different module. So this, in this case, is 3 hours worth of content. So so 3 hours worth of in-class deliverable content, which we can then break up, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but we could break this up and do a session in an education class on leadership in teams and what a successful team looks like, right? So that's the idea, is that this can be broken up and delivered in multiple different settings, and which is why we took a modular approach to it rather than grouping it all in kind of one 3-hour block. Okay. And so finally, what was the result? So after all this work, which was about a year's worth of work and going back and forth with pharmacy and developing an outline that worked and content that was deliverable and that students enjoyed, we had about 20 hours at this point of course-based leadership content. So those are all modular, so divided into half-hour sessions and ready to be delivered next winter for pharmacy. And it's a blended academic and leadership-based approach, which I think is what makes this really valuable. It's not just about the leadership, and it's not just about the health promotion. It's about both together and understanding your role and the role of your colleagues within making that important work happen. And then finally, it's a strengths-based approach to learning. So we make it really clear to students from the get-go that we already think they have the potential to be leaders. It's not that one person or 5 people in this class are going to be leaders. It's that every single one of you have the potential to lead every single day, and in fact are expected to do so within the workforce. And many of them are already doing so within their lives as a student, being involved extracurricularly or through their volunteer work or through their group projects in all these different dimensions. And that so much of this is about identifying what your own strengths are as an individual and how you can apply them and how you can grow them. So this is really fundamental to the work that we are, the direction we're kind of going as student life, but also to the work that we're doing with this course. Because we don't want students to feel that leadership is for, you know, that one person I know who stands up and is rah, 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 but it's that it's for me, and that it's for my strengths and my interest, and that I have the capacity to develop those strengths. Okay.
Ways we can do this. The way we did with pharmacy is this half course idea, right? But these are all basically guest lectures. It's just half a course worth of guest lectures that we're doing. And so we can break out, like Jen said, any of those different pieces, and they're all available online. You can review what we have, and bring them into just one half a class to a full class, or to a bigger part of a course. And another thing that we're interested in doing is actually meeting with your admin and your faculty and your staff in order to be able to kind of sell this a little bit more, because we have a lot of that experience working with students in leadership roles that I think can help us relate maybe to some people in your faculties who are a little resistant to this kind of a thing, and we can really help conceptualize where leadership fits and how it's really helpful for students to develop. And then finally, the project that we talked about with pharmacy and health, or with health promotion, is an example of the kind of experiential partnership or experiential project that we're keen to develop, so that it really embeds leadership learning theory into the experiences that students are doing. It kind of consults on what that looks like and experiences for leadership learning. And so all of this is in the service of things like accreditation. Of course, you know, we have that giant thing hanging over our heads, but it's also in the service of simply making sure that our students are successful as possible for as long as possible. So with that, I think that's our last slide. I think the next one is simply, discussions. We wanted to leave a lot of room, and we do have about 20 minutes to actually talk about what this looks like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get the first one, I'll take the second?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the online components, we will have like a regular Brightspace shell, and some of the content will be available to them online. So there's that piece, but more importantly, in terms of the knowledge dissemination, which is I think one of the unique portions of this course. So students will be doing a leadership and health promotion activity where they will be taking on a project, thinking about their leadership styles and how their team is working together. But at the end of it, they will be expected to translate some of that work that they've done to a public audience. So that could be to a senior citizen population, it could be to a youth population, it could be to a general population, whatever the case may be. And we want them to do that strategically, leaning into those kind of online or social media type platforms. So one way that we see students doing this is creating an infographic and sharing it on LinkedIn, for example, reaching out to professional networks and having a conversation with them about what some of the projects that they've done and how that might translate to some of the work that pharmacists can be doing. It could include making a Facebook event and inviting folks to it, and for a public presentation and that kind of thing. So we want students to be able to find creative ways, whether it's through videos or infographics or through articles, to share some of the important work that they're doing. Because I think that's the value add to doing a health promotion activity is, so what does that mean for the population that you're trying to serve?
Before we get to the second question, it might be worth also talking about that other project you're working on with pharmacy and strengths.
Absolutely. So another way that we've kind of gone with some of this content is some other academic areas have reached out to us and are looking to explore dimensions of this. So one of them is, I mentioned that it's the strengths-based approach. So there's a StrengthsFinder self-assessment tool that students can engage in, which is basically an assessment of what your strengths are, and then some facilitated discussion about what that means for you as an individual and for you when you're working in teams and engaging with people through your everyday work as a student or through your career. So we're actually going to be providing the self-assessment to students through an online pharmacy course, which is part of the new pharmacy, the new pharmacy program that's being provided specifically to professionals. So we're going to be providing that self-assessment tool to students, but then we're actually going to be facilitating some of that training and some of that understanding of what that means completely online. So that will be through providing resources to students through Brightspace, but also through providing a live video where students can engage with an accredited StrengthsFinder facilitator on kind of framing some of that knowledge that they've learned through StrengthsFinder and through their self-assessment, and then engaging with them through questions. So that's part of this as well, is that we're really keen to understand how we can offer this not only to students who are here on the St. John's campus, but also to students who are engaging through distance education.
As for forced collaboration, we heard its comments this morning about forced collaboration, or always kind of frustrating. I think there's no escape from frustrating group work. One thing that I'm excited about our approach is that we're, again, deeply embedding reflection and thinking about how the student is embedded within that team, how that team ends up relating to them, and they have to think about all of that and do a lot of it. One of the key mechanisms of peer review is something that we're calling a group contract or a group charter. And so students, when they sit down, group contract or group charter. So they sit down, we have a template, and they have to sit. The first thing as part of that presentation, that Jen mentioned 2 presentations, one halfway through the course and one at the end. That first halfway point is when they have to share kind of their conceptualization of how their group is going to work. What are their group norms? What happens if somebody is disagreeing with the rest of the group, and how do they fight that? When do they bring in the professor, and how do they invoke that kind of litigative strategy in order to mitigate whatever conflicts are happening? And this is borrowed from my master's program. We used group contracts it was an entirely group-based program, and they use group contracts in most of the courses. And it really did work. It sounds kind of, because you're like kind of contractually, but it really helped. We had to invoke it a number of times in order to be able to solve conflicts. So there was a group where a student constantly disagreed with everything everybody else was doing. She ended up bringing in the professor, and the professor ended up dealing with her, not with us, because we had it all written down in the contract, and there was clear decision-making processes, and so on and so forth. And the cool thing about that is that the group, so if at the beginning you want to be super open-ended, you can be. And therefore fight for want. Together really looks like.
And just to quickly add to that as well, sorry, we'll get to you in a second. So quickly to add to that too, I think that because this is a different approach, it is going to have a challenging aspect to students, and I think that might be a positive thing, and because I think that students recognize the need to understand leadership and to develop their own leadership strengths. They know that this is down the road for them, and they know that there's going to be opportunities for them to engage in formal leadership positions in the future. So there's that kind of interest in engaging with this type of content, but it is really new. So I think it will be challenging for students, but I think that most of the students that we've talked to and through the evaluation that we did with this course that we facilitated really said that, like, this is great content, I want more of this, and I want it to be more embedded in the things that I'm studying. But I think that it will be initially challenging and different, and a mind change in terms of how they think about some of the content that they engage with in the classroom. Go ahead.
and you're coming to talk about a project that we've been working on. We're taking our lessons, but yeah, I want to mention that project. So we're working on, Jen mentioned the Experience Fellows, which is this new co-curricular the things that they're already doing. We're not trying to make them do a bunch of new things. Link those things together in leadership learning. So basically structuring that, and we're using Strengthsbased for those kinds of tools. So we're still building out what the platform will look like, or what the shell will look like. But one of the really neat things about doing this work in the classroom is that we can also relate students to those kinds of extra and co-curricular work. Again, in a way that doesn't exhaust them. The idea is to really make it accessible to everybody, not over time. And so even if, I'm sure there's lots of even if you're, or the instructors, even if you're doing this already, if there's a way to bring us in to just alleviate your work and give you an hour off or something, and we're able to relate and therefore embed the kind of co-curricular, also a huge opportunity for students, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think through the modular approach, we've talked about a little bit already. It's half-hour sessions, so there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't be doing a session through Strengthsbased that is on leadership in teams or leadership versus management or on change management. That's something that we can absolutely work with the instructor to develop, and that we have been doing that type of work already, and we're really keen to continue to do that, because if it exists as a video form and we've figured out a way that we can do some of those engaging pieces online, I think that makes this type of content much more accessible, which at the end of the day is really, we're trying to reach as many students as possible with this type of leadership learning. So we really want to lean into to the kind of distance educators or those people who could benefit from just having that resource online as well. Yeah, it's a really good point. And it's something that we struggled with a little bit, because through our work, typically we're working with students as an individual. So we care less a little bit if you're studying humanities and social sciences versus medicine versus whatever. We're looking at you as an individual, your individual strengths, your individual interests, and how we can help you build your leadership competencies. So we've had to kind of reframe a little bit how we're thinking about that. So making that individual link, how you relate to yourself and to your team, but then also to your profession. So it's a bit of a mind shift for us too, but that is definitely something that we've heard a lot through, just as we're having kind of authentic conversations with people, is that it's not just about, pharmacists doing pharmacy work. It is about how they relate to other healthcare professions, how they're relating to other members of their team, how they're relating to the public, and all those different pieces. So we're really keen on kind of exploring where there's overlap. So some of these teams that exist in the institution, and I know that there's some coursework being done between healthcare professionals and healthcare students within this institution in terms of how they work cross-disciplinary. So I think we're really interested in learning a little bit more about that, and honestly that's a little bit more where our kind of comfort level and our knowledge level is, because we're used to working with students who have all kinds of different academic backgrounds and building teams and facilitating some of the the kind of team-based leadership roles that exist within this university. So that's certainly where a little bit more our expertise is. So it's been different trying to narrow in on a specific professional kind of skill set or knowledge area. But we're really interested in looking at where those links are and how we can work with students in that kind of cross-disciplinary team.
And as we get closer to launch, we are starting to think about IPE, the professional education sessions, and we're going to look at the curricula for those and see how they line up in order to make sure that we can either build on or, I guess, funnel to the upcoming sessions for when students will be doing this in the classroom. So the vision is, like, if there is an IPE session in the middle of this course that focuses on conflict, we'll take the modules that are around conflict and make sure that it's not redundant to just the same thing. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. And do you want to respond? Yeah. 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 We like those. Mm-hmm. Right. So and I both have back doing those societies, and that's I think this work is. So we're thinking about it. Yeah. Yeah. Leadership@mun.ca.
Share some of our plans and some of our current programming that might be applicable to current student leaders and any future student leaders that you might know of who are interested in kind of getting their feet wet and understanding a bit more about some of this work. Leadership@mun.ca is the best place to reach us. Yeah.